Well, Dad, we may have a chance to talk about this later. After we talk to Kerry Eggers, we'll talk about the Michael Flynn ruling, which has been
Yeah, lots to talk about after Kerry, but I'm really looking forward to talking to Kerry.
Yeah. We'll also, of course, talk election news after that. We'll get a little bit more coronavirus stuff. You are listening to X-Ray, and why don't we jump straight to Kerry Eggers? You might want to introduce the segment. It was your idea.
Kerry, are you with us?
I am. Hi, Joe.
Oh, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, you want me to start asking questions, or you want to go first because you're the boss of this show?
Either way, Pop, I was just suggesting, since you booked the segment, that you haven't taken a chance to introduce him. Why are you interested in having the conversation?
First, I'd just like to have a little.
For years.
I'd like to have a little history. Kerry, how did you first decide to get into journalism? And when you decided to get in journalism, or whether you decided or not you found yourself in journalism, how did you wind up concentrating on sports?
Well, my dad, John Eggers, was the sports information director at Oregon State for 30 years when I was growing up, and so I was around both sports and the media. His job was to facilitate the media with interviews and set them up in the press box and so on. And so I saw both parts of it. I always liked to write. I was a jock. I liked sports, so it just seemed like a perfect marriage. And I have an article that I wrote when I was in sixth grade, and I can't believe I did it in longhand pen. I still have it somewhere, and it was like 15 pages. How many sixth grade kids do that? So
wow.
I got started early, and then in college I was the sports editor my sophomore year at Oregon State, and then moved on. I was the managing editor my junior year and editor my senior year, and by that time I knew I wanted to get into the field for my career.
What was your first paid gig?
Yeah, that was at the Oregon Journal. I started the day after I graduated in 1975. You remember the Journal, the afternoon paper that was owned by the Oregonian Publishing Company. We were separate journal. It was a JOA agreement, but we were very competitive with the Oregonian. We were the afternoon paper, they were the morning paper, and for 7 years I worked at the Journal.
I remember the Journal very well, not particularly fondly, because a completely spurious poll that they published twice had a great deal to do with my not becoming Attorney General of the state of Oregon.
Oh.
In my family, they are remembered fondly. In fact, my mother-in-law, who passed away before I had the chance to meet her, was a reporter at the Journal.
Oh.
The question I know is on everybody's mind, Kerry, is in all of these years, do you have, through your up-close observance, been able to recognize the existence or absence of a trailblazer's curse?
Of a trailblazer's what? Curse?
Curse.
No curse. Yeah, they've had some bad decisions and some bad luck. Sam Bowie was one of them. Instead of Jordan, you may have watched the Last Dance series that's been going on. But they could have had, the Blazers could have had Jordan. They chose Sam Bowie, a center. They felt they needed a big guy, and then he had several injuries. Bill Walton, that's very well chronicled about his injury problems, and they've had another Greg Oden later and not too long ago. So yeah, they've had some things. I don't call it a curse.
And who we could have had they not gone with Oden. They just seemed absolutely obsessed with having a big man and passed up people of greater talent.
Well, Joe, until right now, the current NBA, the big man is not as important as it's been in the history of the NBA. Through the years with the Wilt Chamberlains and the Shaquille O'Neals, and you want to have the best big man, and so I don't fault them for that. Now that's not the case. It's more of a running game. It's open, and the big man is almost obsolete.
While we're talking about the NBA, what do you think that the NBA ought to do with the remainder of the current system, if anything, and what's your take on the interesting back and forth between the players and management?
Joe, I think they should shut it down, but they're not going to because of the money, because they need the TV revenue. They're not going to have fans, but they are going to have. It looks to me like they're going to have a season. They're going to let the playoffs go, probably either in Orlando or Vegas. That's what I'm hearing, and they'll be in a kind of a quarantine situation where they're, no fans and playing for TV, so they won't make as much money as they would, but they seem intent on having a season.
Same question for Major League Baseball.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to have like a half season, and they'll probably do it down in Arizona, it sounds like, or possibly Florida, but a similar situation where they have no fans, play the games basically for TV. I think that's what's going to happen.
Go ahead, Jeff.
You got a favorite memory?
That's what I was about to ask, except I was not going to say favorite memory, because when people ask me for favorites, I don't do favorites. So rather than forcing you to pick one, are there any particularly poignant or whatever memories that you have that you think are worth sharing?
Well, I've done this for 45 years, and so I've covered just about everything. From the Super Bowls and World Series and Olympics and the small stuff, which I've enjoyed. So but the two Olympic games that I covered, 84 in Los Angeles, 88 in Seoul, Korea, are, when you look, it was such a difficult process because you're there for 3 weeks and every day you've got multiple stories and you're beat at the end of the day, and then you get up in the morning, you're energized, and you go again. So I probably look at those two things, those two events that I covered, as the sort of the pinnacle that, and such a wide variety of stuff you see at the Olympics. These are both summer games, which I wouldn't have wanted to cover the winter games. The summer games are what I was much more interested in, but that's probably what I would point to.
When you started out, of course, your first one you did in longhand, but I'm sure that you were using a typewriter when you were in high school and for years after that. Did you welcome the transition when you no longer had to type it and then initially call it in over the telephone, and then maybe when fax started working, fax it in to where you could just do it all on a computer and push the button and voila, it showed up in the newsroom? Did you welcome that? And
that's exactly what it was. In 1975, we would type our story out and dictate it to somebody on the other end on the phone. That's exactly what happened. Then there was a thing called a telegram, where you would type your story and then use the phone. There'd be a phone jack, but it would take 6 minutes with each page. So if you had a 4-page story, it would still take 24 minutes. Then came in the Radio Shacks, and that's when it really changed, the technology. Then it was just through the phone, and then eventually it was emailing. But the technology, Joe, has mostly been very good. Now, some of the stuff has been a little difficult to get used to, but once you get used to it, then absolutely, it's just so much easier. It's so much different than when I started 45 years ago.
Looking for memories, I was present the night that Mouse Davis told his star quarterback to go for it against Boise State, and PSU ran up 100-point game. And I wondered if by any chance you covered that story, and if you did, what was your reaction to it at the time, and what are your thoughts about it in retrospect?
Yeah, that was actually against Delaware State.
Was it Delaware State? Okay.
I covered them the year before, Neil Lomax's junior year, and in fact did a George Plimpton type thing. I spent a week playing with. I was only 24 years old, so I was still in pretty good shape, and I went and spent a week with Mouse. Mouse was fantastic. It was so much fun to cover him. The next year was when they ran those scores up. They scored 93 on Cal Poly and then 100 on Delaware State. I didn't cover those games. I wasn't there. I think it was bad. I think it was bad form on Mouse's part. I know he was trying to get publicity and so on, but I just think running it up like that against a rather hapless program is not very becoming.
What do you think is going to happen to the Winterhawks, and what do you think about the possibility that the owner of the Pickles might pick them up?
Don't think it'll happen, and they'll be fine. They'll have another owner. Gallagher, I guess, used them for collateral in one of his business dealings. He's a multi-millionaire, an oil magnate up in Calgary, and he's done a good job running that. They've had the best program in the whole Western Hockey League through the last 20 years. They've been very successful, and they will be. They'll do fine. There'll be a new owner, and they'll be here next year as the Winterhawks.
Do you think there's any real possibility that they might make it into the majors?
That Portland will get an NHL franchise?
Yeah.
We have a ready-made NHL building in Moda Center.
Right. The facility is just there.
There was no interest on Paul Allen's part. I don't think Jody Allen has interest. Chris McGowan, the CEO, has a background. He worked with the Los Angeles Kings, but I just don't think so. I think the best chance we have for another Major League franchise, Joe, is going to be Major League Baseball.
And you really think there is a chance, even though we do not have a facility and the challenge for a facility is very large?
That's the one thing we don't have, and you need to have a stadium to go. But they have, according to Mike Barrett, who is one of the guys that's in the management situation right now, they believe they have the ownership that has the money that would spearhead. It would have to be a private-public partnership, but there would not be any tax dollars involved, is what I'm told. So, I think there's a decent chance. They've met with the commissioner. They want to make it 32 teams. They want to have at some point expansion. I don't know when that's going to happen, and it's been longer than we hoped. I hope by now we'd have at least gotten it on the books, but I still think there's a decent chance it'll happen.
And I've got to tell you that the person on the other side of the window from me is cheering you on because she's a great supporter. What advice might you have for some young person just starting out covering sports today?
Yeah, it's a different business. It's a difficult business. The newspaper industry is just crashed. It's so sad for me because I've been, it's been a big part of my life, and I hate to see what's happened. There will always be, though, a venue for writers and sports writers, and right now there's The Athletic has got most of the good writers in the country. It's a website devoted just to sports, and even if you just want to write news or politics or whatever you want to write, there's always going to be a venue, probably through the internet. I don't know if print is going to go away. I still love print, but it seems like the young people are not reading magazines and newspapers anymore. So maybe it's all going to be on your phone or on your laptop or your tablet. But there will always, my advice would be is to read as much as you can. That was the thing for me. I was a voracious reader, and I think then you don't just read one thing. Read everything, all types of things that you can read, and that gives you as much of a background as you could possibly have, and then you're ready to do the writing part of it.
For what it's worth, I really fear the death of printed newspapers. And I've, on this program, have said more than once that if I were on the school board, I would try to get a program instituted which would require, starting no later than junior high, and maybe even as early as the 5th or 6th grade, requiring students to read at least one newspaper every week and report on some story on it, to develop an appetite, because the thing that a newspaper does or can do is to provide a common place for people to get information. And what I see with the death of newspapers and everything going online and on TV, cable, is you just get it from folks who agree with you, and so there is no common source of news for anything.
The mainstream media, to me, Joe, is just absolutely integral in our society. These are trained journalists, and I'm afraid that that's going away to bloggers, and anybody on social media can have an opinion, and a lot of times those opinions are not very educated. I worry about the way our president is seems to have a vendetta against the media, and I just hate to see, as you say, what's happening. I think that's a good idea as far as young people being required to read it, and maybe they can learn to appreciate it.
Develop an appetite. Jeff, what else do you want to ask before we let Kerry go?
So I was going to ask you how you're enjoying the current Trailblazers season, the current Thorns season, the current Portland Timbers season, and the current Winterhawks season, but we don't have any of those. So what are you doing to spend your time when you're not either writing about sports nor watching them?
Well, I've just developed a website, kerryeggers.com, and I've been working on that with my engineer, Dave Wilson, who's a great guy and has been sort of leading me through the process. So I'm going to be doing, probably be doing some sort of a podcast series for fun and also possibly a little bit of writing, But, as far as what I've been doing, we have a place at the beach that we've stayed at a few times.
Where at the beach?
Lincoln City.
Uh-huh.
And I've been watching a little bit, I've been binge watching old Twilight Zone, episodes that I haven't looked at for many, many years, and just kind of having and working in the yard, probably the same thing you guys have been doing.
What should we have asked? Should we go ahead?
If you want to put your podcast on XRAYpod.com, we'd be honored, and we'd love to help promote your work. There are multiple fans of yours in our world.
And what should we have asked you that we didn't?
I'm not done, Pop.
You're not done. Okay, go for it.
I only got to ask one. All
right, go on.
Yeah. Over the years, one of the things you have witnessed has been other journalists hanging it up, and a lot of them not hanging it up because it was, a retirement age or nearly retirement age, but just as you said, you talked about the Portland Journal. I think at the time I was told by the friend of mine who started another newspaper that at the peak of the Oregonian, at the time that it subsumed the Journal, there were 400 people in the Oregonian newsroom, if you counted everybody, if you counted photographers, etc. And now I think there's something closer to 40. So you've had a chance to watch this seismic change in the journalism landscape. What are folks doing? What are some of the more interesting things you've seen the respected journalists or even Cub journalists in Portland go on to do? Any trends you've noticed?
Oh boy, yeah, you're right. When the Journal and the Oregonian merged, they did not let anybody go in 1982. That was great, and you're right. We had a huge news staff. When the Tribune started in 2001, very large staff, very good staff. We were publishing twice a week, and we were twice named the national winner of the best newspaper in America for a non-daily. So, but now, yeah, it's like a skeleton crew, and the people. You're right. A lot of people left the business because they could see things. See what was happening, and before they wanted to beat it out the door, and a lot of them went into private business. My friend Dwight James, he went over to radio and TV. Just a lot of people have gone to things that they didn't want to do because most of us were in this business just like you guys for the love of it, and not so much the money, although you want to make a decent living too. And now it's very difficult to make a decent living in this business. That's probably my biggest regret.
I got another question, a little more germane to my tongue-in-cheek question about the Blazers curse. I am more superstitious than you because I'll also throw in Arvydas Sabonis, and I'll also throw in LaRue Martin, and I'll also throw in the fact the lawyer that I spoke to told me about who gave me some more facts about the doctors, the Portland Trailblazers doctor who Bill Walton blames for his career being derailed. But I want to ask you a more serious question. If you were to name your top 4 Trailblazers in history in order, okay, now identifying who the top 4, I don't think that's not all that hard necessarily, but in order might be hard. Who do you say are the greatest 4 Trailblazers in order?
Yeah, the Mount Rushmore of the Blazers would be Clyde Drexler, number 1, Damian Lillard, number 2, Bill Walton, number 3. Number 4 is a little bit more up in the air. I think you could throw Lucas, Aldridge, Brandon Roy. Those 3 guys come to mind, and I could live with any one of those 3.
What would you think that Damian Lillard would need to do? Obviously, if he won a championship, you'd put by some fluke, we won a ring. I suspect that would put Lillard above. But what do you think Damian Lillard would need to do to be considered, in your eyes, the greatest Blazer of all time?
Well, Clyde is still well ahead of him in most of the statistical categories during his time with the Blazers. He was on the Dream Team. He was voted one of the top 50 players in the game when the leagues celebrated their 50th anniversary. I think he was an All-Star 8 times. He was a runner-up for the MVP in 1992 to Jordan. He led the Blazers to the finals twice. So those are all credentials that's going to be hard for Damian to catch. That doesn't mean he won't catch him. And Damian has stated that he wants to be a Blazer for his career, and if he lasts another 5 or 6 years, perhaps leads them to the NBA Finals, then I think it's cause for, let's have a debate and say which one of them is greater.
Clyde,
you got a text in.
Clyde was clearly he's clearly number one. One of my best sports memories was I had the privilege of being in Detroit in the box of a company where I just taught a seminar that day when Oregon beat Detroit in the first game of the playoffs, and it was a wonderful thing. Excuse me, Jeff, I cut you off.
When we just got a text in that asked who's going to be in the World Series, and I might pile onto that if there is going to be half a season of the Major League Baseball, and if there is going to be a completed season, a playoffs for the NBA. If you wanted to offer any predictions about who the finalists might be for both Major League Baseball and the NBA.
I said before the season that the Clippers would come out of the West. I still think they look to me like the best team, and Milwaukee's certainly the best team in the East. So I'd say the Clippers and Milwaukee, and I guess I'd say the Clippers. And boy, the major leagues, that's so far ahead. I really, really don't know. The Dodgers look awfully good to me, but let's see. Let's let them get into the season a little bit, and then I might have a better opinion.
Dad, you got anything else for this witness?
Well, I am just so pleased that we finally were able to connect, Kerry. We so much appreciate your being with us, and keep your pen going.
Oh, wait,
appreciate
Kerry,
that.
Kerry, I did want to. You mentioned something else. You mentioned something else that I want to ask you about, which is The Last Dance, because you tweeted something the other day that pointed out that Michael Jordan's first wife, Juanita, has been conspicuously silent during this documentary series, if we can call it a documentary series. What are your reflections on after watching the series?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I mean, it come at the perfect time, Jeff, when we have nothing live to watch, and it's just been, the ratings gone through the roof. Michael's has control of the content, so I'm a little surprised that he's allowed himself to look as bad as he does, but obviously he doesn't think he looks bad, or he wouldn't allow it. As far as his wife, I wish he'd have allowed her to, give some comments, but that's the way it goes. I know when I wrote my autobiography with Clyde, the only thing that he did not want to do was talk about his ex-girlfriends, and I said, your wife will understand it. That was a long time ago. Nope, he didn't even want to put their names in it. So this is a former wife of Michael, and he obviously doesn't want her to have a voice in it. And I guess I understand.
Anything else that you think we would be seeing in a different light, or might get more or additional information about if Jordan weren't essentially in control of having final cut over?
Well, I think they would have probably emphasized, if you got an independent producer, they probably would have emphasized the part about the gambling part, and there's some real questions about his when he left the game. I don't believe that he was suspended quietly. They would certainly announce that if he did, and David Stern vehemently denied it. But it would have been more interesting to talk a little bit about that. And I think they've done a good job of developing the characters. Phil Jackson, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, Michael, even Steve Kerr. I think they've done a really, really good job of that. I think give kudos to the producer for what they've done.
No, it's been a joy to watch. I share with you there's some angles that I remain curious about, and my own, conspiracy theory brain. I think the secret suspension overstates it, but it would not surprise me at all if there had been warnings offered and said, hey, listen, if you keep down this path, there's going to have to be something that impacts your relation with Nike or impacts your relation with the NBA, and that part of his decision of stepping away when he did was to avoid what might come down the pike. That wouldn't surprise me even a little bit, but of course we're not going to get that part. But I just want to pile on with Pop, and he can say goodbye, but I want to say thank you so much for all you've done to help us understand one of the real joys of being a Portlander, being an Oregonian, following the sports that we do have, and the career you've put in that is so enriched the civic life and the sporting life of Oregon. And I'm just so grateful for you spending some time with us today.
And for what
That's
it's
very
worth,
nice. I really appreciate being on with you guys today. Thank you very much.
And for what it's worth, I picked up yesterday's paper today. The reason I picked it up today is because I have been a faithful reader of the Trib ever since it began, and I had the Tuesday-Thursday habit, and I still have the Thursday habit. Kerry,
Cool.
thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye-bye.